Hi, my name is Dr. Moira Stevenson. I'm the founder and director of Parenting with Confidence, which is a support network for parents, and I'm also a clinical psychologist working with children, teens, families, parents, and young adults. This is a really short video for parents of young children, toddlers, during COVID-19. In this video, I'll cover three main topics. One is explaining COVID-19 to young children. The second one will be talking about screen time and what to do about screens. And the third will be about routine and how to get some structure into your life if that's what you're looking for. Okay, I'm going to make this short and sweet. When we're talking about explaining complex information to young children, first of all, COVID-19 is new territory, but we do know some things about communicating with young children. They are be clear. When children are lacking information or don't understand something, they'll often fill in the blanks on their own, and they'll fill in the blanks sometimes in very worrisome and strange ways. So we want to try our best to answer children's questions in clear and concise ways. So I want to emphasize the word concise there. Young children can only handle a certain amount of information at a time. So if you're explaining something about COVID or coronavirus to your child and they seem distracted or uninterested, it either means that the way you're explaining they can't understand, or they've reached a level of information overload and they're done for now. Another thing that's important to remember is that young children are not as developed verbally as adults. So you might want to consider using things like video animations or stories or drawings to help you explain what's going on with COVID. I've put some resources for parents somewhere near this video, various videos and children's stories to help you out with that. Okay, but the key thing to remember is be clear. And if your child does seem like they're in information overload, that's the time to stop talking, stop explaining, and wait for them to ask you a question about it or for another opportunity to present itself. And do not be afraid of repeating what you said. Just keep it clear. The next thing I'll talk about really quickly is screen time. Oh my God, what to do? Okay, so at first I saw parents going in two different directions. Some wanted to go very much routine, keep it like daycare, school, preschool. Other parents, like, we're in a crisis, we're just going to mellow out and watch Netflix for a little while. I think that screen time is a really individual thing, and what's most important for parents is to understand the pros and the cons, okay? So the number one pro about screens is that they're highly distracting and they really stimulate children so that we can go do other things as parents. Yay! So that's one of the main pros, one of the pros. Also keeps them up with popular culture if that's what they're watching. Anyways. The downside is that screens are really not optimal for learning. When we're using a screen, we don't need to do much to be stimulated by that screen. So think about when you're watching a TV show. You can watch and be entertained, and you don't really have to do anything to get entertained. It will do all the work for you. Well, it's the same thing for your children, and even educational games on iPads and things like that have been researched and really do not correlate to as good learning, if you want to call it that, as things like play and things that require more of the senses and more of your child's skills in order to be successful at it. So, for example, a construction toy like Lego, I need to actually do quite a bit to make that Lego interesting. If I could stare at it, but I don't think it would be that much fun. So that's really what you want to keep in mind when it comes to screen time. The amount of screen time really depends on you as a parent. What you need is that big pro, like how much time do you need to get stuff done, and your child's behavior around screens. So some children really get hooked on screens and will show a lot of addictive behaviors around screens. They'll be asking for it. They'll want it all the time. So you want to watch out for that, because well, it's just not very much fun for the parent, and you're going to have temper tantrums most likely. So if your child is like that, you might want to consider cutting screen time down quite a bit to reduce those behaviors. You may even just want to try 1 day a week or something like that. But then here I'm saying that, and I'm sure some of you are like, but what the hell am I going to do to keep my child occupied? So I have a few suggestions for independent play. Young children, it's more difficult for them to play on their own. They need more support from their parent. There are certain activities I've noticed that children do tend to do more on their own, things like coloring, activity books, construction games like Lego, and for more the preschool age kids, sometimes they'll really be into make-believe and imaginary play. All children are really different on what they like to do and what really occupies them when they're on their own. So again, you kind of need to observe and see what your child likes. And then I would recommend getting them started on an activity like that you know they like to do on their own, but also to stay nearby. Our children are quite stressed right now, and young children will often show their stress and anxiety through being clingy and wanting a parent nearby. That's a sign of some separation anxiety. And what you can do as a parent to kind of just make them a bit more comfortable is be nearby, but you can still be doing your own thing if they're playing on their own, right? So staying visually available or at least within earshot. I wanted to show you a quick example of what we set up at our house. We have a 3.5-year-old. So we set up a workstation where our daughter can do activity books because that's what we found occupies her by herself. And then I can sit where I am now and do some paperwork. But if she has a question, I'm here to answer. But at the same time, I can still get a little bit done if I have some paperwork to do. Now, this obviously you're going to be a bit distracted, so if you have work to do that requires a lot of concentration, you might want to try something else. For that, if it's possible, if there's another parent around or another adult or an older kid around where you can kind of have them take charge and trade off, or if you and your partner can block your work periods so that one person can be more in charge of parenting while the other one works, that could also help with reducing screen time if that's something you want. Again, I'm just giving these suggestions about if you want to reduce screen time. If you're feeling like, you know what, this is a stressful time and we're just going to watch screens and we're just going to go with the flow, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so these tips are really if you want to reduce screen time and if your goal is really education that day, right? Parenting with confidence, the reason I use that word, that title, is because it's about parenting how you feel comfortable parenting, right? Okay, and last but not least, routines. So a lot of times in popular culture when the routines are mentioned, they're kind of described as something much more rigid than they need to be. With young children, we often recommend routine and structure because it's relieving for a child to know what to expect in a day. So a routine helps children who can't read, who don't know how to tell time, understand what their day is going to look like, okay? And by having this repetitive routine, they learn, okay, after this thing, that thing happens, and after this thing, that other thing happens. So that's really what a routine does. That's why we recommend it. It doesn't need to be every single thing done in the day, every type of meal done, all written out, all structured. That's not what I'm talking about. The most basic routine you can have is when do you wake up, when do you eat, when do you go to sleep, right? And in that, if you want to have more structure, you can have, okay, in the morning we do certain activities, in the afternoon we do different types of activities, and breaking it up like that. I would also suggest that when you want to have some play or activity time with your child, to give them some choices. Have an idea of what you want to do and some options available and the materials available, and then let your child choose. Our children are really stressed right now, or some of them are, I don't want to say all of them, but and getting that sense of control back can really be therapeutic for them. This is a time where they haven't had much control over anything that's happening to them, even less so than usual. and letting them have a little bit of choice back in the activities, the toys, the games that they play can really help with young children. Because also another thing to keep in mind is that young children aren't going to just come up and tell you necessarily what's wrong. They're going to show it through their behavior. So my last word of advice for you parents of young children during this unprecedented time is to really observe how your children are behaving and adjust accordingly. Okay, it was great catching up. I encourage you to send in your questions because I hope to do a follow-up video really targeting what's most pressing for parents right now. Okay, take care, be safe, be well.